Hello, my name is Carrie Batchoffer, and this presentation is to discuss the learning theory of constructivism. During this presentation, we're going to be discussing the background and history of constructivism, how knowing and memory play into constructivism, what is the learning process, what is their motivation, and what are some implementations for teaching and learning using this method. Constructivism is not one single theory or theorist, but is in fact a central idea of multiple theorists. Merriam and Barima, 2014, page 36, state that learning is the construction of meaning from new experiences. So this, in other words, how can people make sense of their experience? It also refers that learning within constructivism is an active process. Merriam and Barima, 2014, also identify Piaget, Dewey, and Vygotsky as three of the main theorists central to constructivism. Nathan, 2022, further dive into the three theorists and describe how they connect to constructivism. Piaget has a simulation and accommodation, where a simulation is that knowledge is built and accommodation is how knowledge continues to adapt. Dewey discusses that real-world problems utilized in class help create connections from the class content to applicable situations. And Vygotsky refers that learning is a social construct, that students should engage not only in the learning and the activities, but also with each other. Vygotsky also refers that faculty should provide scaffolding to create and be facilitators of information and not administrators. For a classroom that is rooted in constructivism, the faculty should provide opportunities for the students to further their experiences, and some of those experiences can be aided by the use of clinical simulation, service learning, nurse externships, or group projects. And Billings and Halstead, 2024, on page 288, some of the roles of the faculty within constructivism is to use team-based approach and include students in peer mentoring and facilitating a learning environment that helps involve the students with others. To develop more knowing and memory, the student within constructivism builds and adapts with new experiences based off of old experiences. In Knowles et al. 2020, on page 175, it refers to that experience affects the sensory memory through attention and selection of information to process, and that for long-term memory, prior experience has a large effect on how that information is folded into long-term memory. During constructivism, students are the key player in this game. Learning is built on active information and active engagement, not passively learning the information. New knowledge is connected to prior knowledge, and those connections are strengthened with understanding by engaging within the content and applying that content to their new learned experiences. In constructivism, one of the foundations is that learning is not an end objective, but is instead an ever-evolving, never-ending process. Learning is highly individualized for each student. And Nathan, 2022, he describes 5 principles that he has identified in healthcare education that aid to the learning process in constructivism. The first principle is that knowledge is constructed on previous knowledge. Each student brings in their own set of experiences and learning that we build off of. The second is that learning is an active process through a simulation, which is how knowledge is built, and accommodation, which is how knowledge adapts. The third concept is that learning is fundamentally a social construct, that they do not just learn by themselves, but by interacting with their peers, faculty members, and other members of the healthcare workforce during their clinical experiences. The fourth principle is that we should value the opinions and point of view of others, that others' perceptions of a situation help to adapt our experiences. The final principle he states is that learning is constantly evolving and is not the end objective. Constructivism also discusses the role of the faculty member. The faculty should not act as the main administrator of the content, but instead they should serve as a facilitator of the learning environment. In Billings and Halstead 2024 on pages 288 and 289, they refer to the scaffolding or necessary support for the student while learning, and then withdrawing support as the student starts to demonstrate mastery. Faculty can accomplish this by asking questions to initiate discussions, and then slowly allowing the student to continue to build and withdrawing and asking fewer and fewer questions. Knowles et al. 2020 discusses the use of reflection as part of the learning process, and that this helps students to become more motivated as they can see that where they learned and have come from in their growth through this learning process. Students should be self-motivated, that each student brings in their own individual experiences, and these experiences and these internal motivations help drive the student forward throughout their learning process and in their education. Knowles et al. 2020 on page 175 discusses how the faculty can act to support the learner by helping them develop ownership for their overall problem or task, and how it applies to the end goal, such as their nursing license. The student has to be motivated by knowing that their experience is continuing to build knowledge. This helps them create connections to previously learned knowledge into future knowledge, and this helps them to continue to grow and adapt. Now that we've covered the foundations of constructivism, let's discuss some of its implications for teaching and learning. With constructivism, the faculty should be providing an active classroom. In Billings and Halstead 2024, some descriptions of active classrooms are items such as a flipped classroom format, group activities, role-playing, and peer work. These help students actively engage in the information and help the brain process the information and connect it to previously learned experiences. Students should also be encouraged to participate in experiential learning opportunities, such as clinical, simulation, and nursing externships. Not only do these offer opportunities to gain new experiences, there's also the opportunity to help connect those experiences back to content and help drive motivation. In Knowles et al. 2020, on page 176, we should offer the students opportunities to participate in reflection. Promoting the use of portfolios helps with reflection so that students can see their continued growth, which helps with motivation and connecting previous knowledge to new knowledge. As stated in Knowles et al. 2020, we should meet the learner where they are. This helps create individual learning that can aid in a greater comprehension for the individual learner. Formative assessments in nursing education help us to identify any learning gaps and make adjustments to help close those gaps during the learning process. So what type of formative assessments can be done in the constructivism idea that learning is never done, that learning is continuous? Well, some examples include self-reflection so that the student can see where they were and where they have come to, discussions both created and facilitated by the faculty, but then also within their peers, and this includes collaboration. And also peer evaluations, giving their peers the opportunity to tell them what they identified as strengths and weaknesses, but also that individual the opportunity to discuss that with their peers. A personal example is how I format my simulations regardless of the simulation scenario. I always start with a pre-brief, and I initiate my pre-brief by explaining the goal of the simulation to the students. I then open and facilitate the discussion by asking what do they already know about that situation and scenario we're about to run through. I have the students collaborate to review a chart and to write a SOAP note together, looking at the patient's subjective, objective assessment and their perceived plan. They will then analyze this new information and delegate roles and create goals for themselves to do during the simulation scenario, which typically lasts 45 minutes to 1 hour. After the sim scenario, we go through a pre-brief. We discuss their thoughts and feelings on how they did. We reflect on their strengths and areas of improvement. I give, as the faculty member, constructive feedback, but then offer the opportunity for each of the peers to give constructive feedback to each other. They have a post-sim assignment that is a one-page reflection, and then this reflection is filed into their portfolio for their program. At the end of their program, during their practicum simulation, they'll write another reflection page, and then they are to write a program-long essay to reflect on their clinical growth. Thank you so much for listening. Here are my references that I used during this presentation. If you have any further questions, please let me know.